When you're in trouble miles from nowhere, sometimes all you have to keep you alive is hope. I'm William Shatner. Tonight, true stories of sudden danger and people who care on Rescue 911. We begin in the British Columbia coastal mountains above Vancouver, Canada. On July 24th, 1990, 63-year-old Bud Reitman and his 15-year-old grandson David James set out on a hike. Some of the footage in the story was taped as events unfolded in the hours that followed.
Bud Reitman and his grandson David had hiked the trails in this area many times before.
I was to meet them at 7:30, so I headed up to Lions Bay. I wanted to arrive there about 7 o'clock, and I could just read until they come. So I settled down and I got the radio all set up to receive their message.
7:30, you better call Margaret.
Okay.
Call Grandma.
On this hike, Bud had brought a walkie-talkie so he could contact his wife Margaret. But when Bud tried to radio and warn her they would be late, he couldn't reach her.
Margaret!
7:30, there wasn't anything. It was just static. I couldn't get any reception at all.
Let's go down to the hill here. Find a clear area.
Fog was starting to roll in, and it would soon be getting dark. So they decided to leave the trail and cut across to another trail, further down the side of the mountain.
Grandma's going to be getting worried about this time. Watch your step through here. Just... Look out, Dave!
'cause I thought there's no way he'll get out of this alive. But I thought I had to get down to him. I have to be as careful as I can because I'll break my neck too.
"63-year-old Bud Reitman had fallen nearly 600 feet down the slope of the mountain.
My granddad was bleeding pretty badly when I first got down to him. Looked like every bone in his body was broken. I knew he was alive, but I didn't think he'd have much longer. First thing that came into my mind was, I gotta help him, I gotta do something to save his life. So I just took my jacket and slid it under his head and wrapped his head up. Said, if you can hear me, I'm going for help.
Okay, I'm gonna go for help. If you can hear me, try and hold this on tighter. It might slip off, okay? I'm going for help, okay?
I gotta get somewhere where I can contact somebody. In my mind, I was saying, if there's a will, there's a way.
The dense fog was making it difficult to see, and the terrain suddenly got much steeper and rockier.
A couple times I'd slip. There was layer upon layer of rocks, and it would sort of crumble away, and I thought, I gotta stop hurrying because you're just gonna fall and kill yourself. I just couldn't go any further. All around me were cliffs. If I moved, I could slip right off and keep sliding right off the cliff and kill myself.
David's only hope for getting help was his walkie-talkie.
The knobs were broken. There was some sand and water on it, and I didn't think it was going to work, but I shook it around and banged it around a little, thinking that let's hope it works.
Is anyone out there? Please, anyone! Mayday, mayday!
When we continue...
David!
And they had the best looking for him. They heard his whistle. He's whistling like crazy, but they still couldn't locate him. It's like a needle in a haystack.
"15-year-old David James was hiking with his grandfather when the older man slipped and fell 600 feet down the side of a mountain. When David went for help, he became stranded on a rocky ledge. All he had to rely on was a whistle and a walkie-talkie that might not be working.
But someone in a nearby town did manage to pick up David's call for help, and pass word on to his parents.
He came across that he had picked up a message from my son, that he was lost in the mountains and that his grandfather was dead. And when I realized what mountains they're talking about, people die up there within sight of the city. Have you flown the RCMP?
I can't believe something like this happened. I mean, my God, this is a little hiking trip. I went into a bit of a panic state, and, you know, by this point it was dark.
Okay.
I'm going to go call search and
Yeah,
rescue.
do that. Look, would you tell David that his mother and father are on the way over there?
The North Shore Search and Rescue Team was called in to begin a ground search, headed by George Salahi.
We sent in one hasty response team from Cypress Bowl.
This looks like a good spot for a whistle check.
David! David!
We also then had one of our other search masters with his truck, which had a CB radio in it, to try to make direct contact. And then the police phoned me back and told me that somebody in Horseshoe Bay was talking directly to the lad.
Hey, you're pretty important in the middle of the night in Horseshoe Bay, let me tell you, guy. Everybody's rooting for you here.
Michael Berry had purchased a set of walkie-talkies only a few hours before he first heard David's cry for help.
It was just too coincidental for words.
First of all, I'd never, ever bought a pair of walkie-talkies, I don't think, in my life, and it happened to be that very day that I did.
A very fortuitous buy. Best purchase I ever made. They're gonna be up there soon. Hey. Don't talk like that. Of course you will. You're only...
Around 2 o'clock in the morning, we suggested to David's parents that they should go down to speak to David, just to help calm him down.
How are you doing?
Terrible. I'm freezing cold, but I'm scared.
Pretty soon, David, pretty soon. Are you using your whistle once in a while?
Yeah, but I'm worried I'm behind rocks, but there's too many house supposed to hear me.
Don't worry, just keep it up. Your mom wants to say hi.
Hi, honey.
I love you.
I love you too. He'd been through a really emotional time. Someone that he loved had gone through a terrible accident. He truly believed that his grandfather was dead. Minutes, okay?
Did you not get upset? Don't know that for sure. Maybe just symptoms, so don't worry about that. We'll find your system and we'll look into that, okay? I saw David not dead.
One thing he'd emphasize was the amount of blood. So you start putting two and two together in your head, and the little bit of hope that you have dwindles.
What's going on down there?
They've got 2 search teams on the mountain, and we're down in Horseshoe Bay, and this is where they've made contact with you. But the trouble is, honey, you know, we don't want your batteries to run out. You gotta make this short and brief, okay? You gotta keep blowing on that whistle and just stay calm, okay?
And look to the sky. The lights.
You gotta look to the sky for the lights too, David. It's really important, okay? I love you too, sweetheart.
We had the assistance of the BC Ferries, and we used their spotlight, which we used for pinpointing the boy.
Hi, David?
Yeah?
Okay, we're scanning the lights again, okay? So we know it's still foggy up there, but we're still going to scan it. So you tell us, give us a shot if you see anything.
Okay. What light?
When David came across the walkie-talkie and said, yeah, the light's right on me, but by the time that message was relayed to the ferry, the light had moved, and they never did get that light back on him, and that was like, your heart sinks.
David, I want you to give me what you feel is your location, but separate your words very carefully so that I can understand them.
And they had the best looking for him, and hours later, even with the walkie-talkie and pretty well knowing where he was, they couldn't find David. They heard his whistle. He's whistling like crazy, but they still couldn't locate him. It's like a needle in a haystack.
Rescue 911 will continue.
911, do you have an emergency?
No problem.
following morning, David's walkie-talkie batteries were running low, and his signal was fading. His uncle, John Reitman, tried to maintain contact with him.
David's radio was getting pretty weak, and the search and rescue guys knew he needed to bring the helicopter in. So I took off down the highway until we got to Newman Creek, and David's signal got pretty strong there, so we knew he was up above us. Okay, this is the way they want you to do it. Either up the hill or down the hill, and left or right as you're facing down the hill. As you're looking towards the water, do they have to go left or right? And do they have to go up or down? Left and down. Yep. Don't panic, David. They'll just keep circling around until they lock right in on you. Don't worry. Don't. The helicopter went right over top of him a couple times, and David was getting a little freaked because he could see it go by, and it didn't stop. And his batteries were just about gone.
I can't hear you, David. Keep trying. Try spelling it, David. Try to spell it. I can't hear you. I still can't understand. I'm sorry.
You figure right?
My right. My right.
5240, parents say my right.
Can you see the chopper right now?
He's right above you, what? So stop there?
We got him.
We got him.
They got you, pal. They got you.
All right.
They see ya.
The last thing we heard was the copter pilot saying, "We have visual." I yelled, "David, that's fantastic." He was gone. I mean, that was it. There was no batteries left.
After 13 hours stranded on the mountain, David was airlifted out to where his family was waiting for him. He was then transferred to a second ambulance and taken to a nearby hospital where he was treated for mild hypothermia.
Just seeing him flesh and blood, and all his fingers and toes are there, and give him a big hug and say thank God.
He really wanted to tell the story about my dad. In the back of his mind, I think that he felt that he hadn't done enough.
I was lucky that I got the radio to work.
It was tough to get him to go to the hospital. He was going to go back up. He was going to find his grandfather.
The search then focused on finding Bud Reitman.
Finally, the small helicopter snuck out from where we were, went back to Newman Creek. They took quite a risk to get into the area because they were basically dodging the clouds and the fog, and it was fairly windy at that time, too.
Within 2 hours, David rejoined the search for his grandfather.
I got back to the mountain, and the first thing I did was I went in, looked at the map, figured I knew where he was. Maybe I can help out.
David's directions were passed to the two helicopters, while the ground search continued below, including volunteer Bob Charters.
We continued until finally the terrain became so steep that we had to start fixing ropes and rappelling down the ropes. We heard the smaller helicopter, Little Bell 209, above us, and they spotted us and said they could see our climbing rope through the trees. And then there was a pause, and they said, "Holy smokes, we see him down below you." Another pause. "My God, he's waving at us." When we heard that, it was just like a shot of electricity went through the whole group. We were just charged.
He has responded to us by moving his arm and waving at the helicopter, and we're just making efforts to get our crew in there, and they're rappelling down now to the location of the subject.
I saw Bud. He looked up. He could see me. He couldn't move. I just yelled out to him, "I'm with the North Shore Rescue Team. We're going to get you out of here as soon as possible."
Bud, how you doing? Hey, don't move.
He looked up at me, and the only thing that he asked me that he wanted to know was how David was.
Nearly 19 hours after he fell down the mountain, rescuers finally reached Bud Reitman.
He'd been through a horrendous fall, a very tough, cold night, and he's well on his way to severe hypothermia at that point. But Bud seemed to have a real spirit. He just seemed to be a real gutsy kind of a guy, and it's obvious that he had no intention of packing it in up there.
Word of Bud's rescue was relayed to his family.
Waiting.
Yeah, they said he...
Oh, that's great news.
By the time I walked back, they said, good news, he's moved his arm. That means he's alive. I thought, okay, this is perfect.
Feel good?
Very good job, David.
Thanks.
Luckily.
Thanks a lot.
He was transported to Vancouver General Hospital, where Dr. Ron Walls headed up the trauma team that treated him.
We got a call from the paramedics saying that they were bringing in by helicopter a man who had fallen over 600 feet. When I heard that and knew it was on the North Shore Mountains, which are very rugged, I was expecting to find a patient who would be basically unsalvageable. But when they brought Mr. Reichman in, what we were surprised to see was that he was awake and cooperative and actually very lucid and had no evidence of a significant head injury. It was remarkable to go through his x-rays in sequence and find essentially not a single significant injury. Chest looks good. This is a sleeping bag over here.
He's built like an ox, so I guess we shouldn't have all been so surprised that he came out of it okay. Maybe the other way around. Maybe we should have been surprised if he had come out of this dead rather than alive.
2 months later, Bud has recovered enough to go hiking again.
I think two things saved him. Number one, his grandson's presence of mind in getting down to him and getting him stabilized and then getting out. If his grandson had stayed with him, I think he would have died on the mountain.
This back and this gives you
The second thing is that inexplicable factor. Somebody was smiling on him that day and he took that horrible fall that should have killed him and it didn't.
So if you take that down, aim it. If I had been conscious to see him climb down there unassisted, without ropes, without anybody to help him, would have just killed me to begin with. But the fact that he got there and he remembered all the things that we had talked about under this kind of stress just absolutely delighted me, because I think that most kids his age would have been inclined to panic.
I want to thank the search and rescue people, the West Van police, everybody who was involved. There was nobody who really didn't put a huge effort into it. It was great. I can't thank them enough.
What happened on that mountain has changed my life in that I would never go off the trail for any reason unless I had proper ropes or things like that. I feel good about myself because everything turned out for the best, and I'm just happy that it's over with and my grandfather's okay.
He's a delight to have around, and we've been very close to him since he was born, really. And of course he has his friends and all these other things, but he always has a little time for his old grandpa.
Next.
I need help! We heard a gentleman yelling out for assistance. We went up to see what the problem was and immediately realized that we had it.
This is 911. Do you have an emergency?